everyone. If speech is the greatest gift of God, then language is the highest invention of man. Language adds meaning to life. It cannot be taught. It can be only experienced and learned through experiential learning. Both Aarti C. Rajaratnam and I have, in our own ways, extensively worked with students and education systems, making language learning natural and deeply transformational experience for the learners. This is a recording of a webinar which we both did together for parents and educators titled Words Worth, the Heart of Language. And I would like you to note that the recording available is without the first 15 minutes of the original session. The session focuses on the psychological aspects to language learning, and this has been dealt by Aarti, and I have concentrated on the practical ways to facilitate language learning in the natural and fun way. So what to expect from this session? You will find resources or an understanding on how children acquire language and what we can do as parents and educators, and also activities to help develop basic and advanced language skills. And the session also includes a question answer segment. And I hope both teachers and parents find this interactive session useful and resourceful to make language learning fun and lively. Over to Aarti.
I want you to know, when do these stages actually come alive? What happens? How does a child really learn? So if I were to take this technically, at birth, most children can respond to rhythm. So as soon as the baby is born, which is why rocking is such an important thing, because children start understanding while they're rocking, the mother, the father, whoever is rocking them is also making a couple of sounds. You know, there is this rhythm component when the infant is held. Rhythm is one of the most important aspects of language learning. In fact, if I can quote South African cultures, I mean African cultures rather, African cultures do not teach phonetics. Their alphabet teaching is always rhythm based. They start with rhythm. And my take on this is probably that's why they are so wired to music. And the kind of music that comes out of Africa, I don't think anywhere else in the world it happens that way. That's because at a very, very basic level, the nervous system responds to rhythm. So at birth, and say till about 4 months or so, the child is picking up rhythm. So it doesn't mean that from today you have to start becoming rhythmic if you have a young baby. Just remember that naturally, the baby's brain is wired to picking up rhythm. Between 4 and 6 months, the child starts understanding sound versus noise, that is language sounds, phonemes versus noise. And then they also start recognizing, so this is where I'd like to specifically mention how gadgets destroy language learning. So when a child is using a gadget, everything is already explicitly expressed. So there's a nursery rhyme that's already been recorded, pre-recorded, and the child is listening to already complete sounds. But between the ages of 4 and 6, 4 and 6 months, it's extremely important for the child to be able to be exposed to natural sounds in the environment. Don't go around simulating from tomorrow with a spoon and burtan and all that. Please, I think that's not something that's very good for all of us. But having said that, we need to understand that children need to have a range of sounds in their environment, and they need to, on their own, understand these are sounds that can be used in language, and these are sounds of my environment, and these are sounds that are created by objects, these are sounds created by human beings, these are sounds created by animals. When the brain is able to sort and categorize at this level, language learning becomes more meaningful. When you give a gadget, you destroy this ability. And children who've been given gadgets early do not learn spelling much later, because this ability to differentiate sounds is compromised beyond repair. And I'm giving it to you as a warning, if you're an educator, if you're a parent, please stop gadget use even now. It doesn't really help. It really destroys important neurological processes in the brain. Please understand that I don't gain anything by asking you not to use a gadget, but your child's brain gets compromised majorly. But at 8 months, at 6 months, I missed out a point, sorry. At 6 months, the child starts babbling and cooing, and you'll notice that in response to something, there's this baby that's making excited noises. This is my favorite phase of working with an infant, because, it's telling you that I've understood you and I'm trying to communicate the way you do. And that's the most beautiful aspect, because when they like something, they will have a set of noises. When they don't like something, they'll have a set of noises. And that's like the most beautiful way of working. And at some point, I'd like you to also understand that at 8 months, the same child who has started cooing is beginning to understand groups of sounds. And then they start understanding word boundaries, how a word ends and another word starts. And they also are able to convert actions and experiences into words. So if you notice, they will, you give them food and they have words, specific words that they will create for the food. And many times as mothers or fathers, we also end up telling the child the same word, and the child responds to it. And these are the things that start around 8. At 12 months, the child begins to attach meaning to the words that they're using. And more important, they start mimicking sounds, which means if you're making a sound, they're going to mimic this. A lot of therapists are here. Natural echolalia exists. It doesn't mean that only in autism there will be echolalia. Echolalia is a normal part of speech development. Please allow it. Don't diagnose every form of echolalia as autism. Regular 12-month-olds can also have echolalia, and it's a part of speech development. Now, at 12 months, they're also learning nouns and verbs, and there will be more nouns than there will be verbs. By 24 months, most children are able to use basic sentences. Grammar may not be so good. By 36 months, grammar is 90%, and by 3 years, they're expanding their vocabulary. So this is overall how language learning takes place. And I'm sorry if it was a monologue, but I needed you to understand this base, because beyond this is where we will be able to build language. But what I want to specifically work on, because many of you are parents and also teachers, is that we are, as Indians, driven to push our children to learn English. And English is not the mother tongue for any of our children. It is, if you take it, the second language for some people, probably the third language, especially if you are not speaking the local language. So at one point, what I would like you to understand is that when you are learning the second language, there needs to be a specific progression. And the first stage when children are learning the second language will be that there will be pre-production. And the pre-production usually is between 0, that like as soon as you introduce the language, to about 6 months. And at this point, there is poor comprehension. The child doesn't necessarily understand the language. They don't have the ability to vocalize what they're feeling in that language or what they're thinking. And more important, they start nodding. So if you ask them a question and the child is still nodding in response to your question, then it's telling you that the child has not yet started understanding or applying that language. And this is also the time where the child wants to express something, but they point to an object or they draw an object. And this is the pre-production phase. And usually when you're introducing a second or a third language, this is a period that takes about 6 months or so. It can be more if the exposure is less. The second stage is what we call early production. And early production is between 6 months and a year. And at this point, there is limited comprehension, which means they may understand everyday usage, they may understand action words, the verbs, they may understand basic nouns, but they're still not able to put the language together, put the words together in the language. They use 2-word responses, like, come here, those kind of words will be there. There'll be one noun and one verb. That's what will happen. And they also tend to speak only in the present tense. They're not yet able to use things in the past tense. They can't do a continuous tense or a future tense because they're still in the here and now and they're trying to access that language. Then comes the speech emergence phase. And speech emergence it takes about 1 to 3 years. And this is also one of the reasons I want to mention why schools must not introduce 3 languages straight away in grade 1. And I know many of you will dislike me for that. But if you are doing that, you are creating more problems. And I would like you to think about your process. In fact, at Vedanta, we introduced one language first. For a whole year, the child has that experience. Then at that point, they're also orally being introduced to another language in stories and songs. And then we slowly build upon the other language. Because if you bring all languages together, the grapheme and the phoneme, so the letter and the sound will get confused, the phoneme and the morpheme will get confused, and you're going to have a whole bunch of children who will make spelling errors all through their schooling years and will not be able to enjoy what they're learning. And then the questions I'm not taking now, but I'm going to go through this and then we'll talk about the age of exposure. So speech emergence for any new language takes between 1 and 3 years. So please don't rush to teach a child, and and then the child will be able to do, excuse me ma'am, may I drink some water please, excuse me ma'am, may I use the toilet please. But that will not be meaningful. It will be very functional, and it will be very, very limited. By the time speech emergence happens, comprehension is good, so they're able to understand. They're able to use grammar and basic pronunciation, but there will be errors, and they misunderstand jokes. So they're not able to understand humor, which is the highest use of language. And then, of course, the last is the intermediate fluency, which is between 3 and 5 years of exposing somebody to a language. There is excellent comprehension, and there are very few errors. And advanced fluency takes between 5 and 7 years, which is when they're almost near native speakers. And I want you to understand that this phase will go through three very specific things that you can observe. The first will be the silent phase. The child, when they're exposed to a new language, will go into a silent phase. Sometimes between 6 months and 1 year, they will never speak up in the class. Many teachers will ask me, ma'am, he's speaking at home, he's not speaking in school. That's because they're going through the silent phase, because they need to go through the pre-production and production phase of language. Then comes the basic fluency. So they're beginning to use simple words to start speaking. But the last stage, which is what I want most parents and teachers to understand, after having acquired a language, after acquiring fluency, I will have a backslide. I will make mistakes, deliberate mistakes, so that I will see what your response to me is. So if I've learned a grammatical structure, I've learned a way of pronunciation, I will make a mistake deliberately to see what is the response that an adult, a teacher or a parent is giving me. And this is part of language acquisition, especially in the second language. So please understand that language goes through these three phases, and you will be observing this. And I know I've spoken quite a bit, and Jayanti has been patiently waiting. But before I hand it over to her, I'd also like you to know that, of course, she's an amazing professor, dean, very popular with the students, very good in her subject. But for me, she will always be a friend from LKG till grade 12. And she was a poet, I was a playwright. We used to spend 1 hour every day after school for the longest time sitting down and writing and creating a lot of work. So for me to just co-host this webinar with her is such an honor. And I hand it over to Jayanti, and she's going to take over now.
Thank you so much, Aarti. It's my pleasure, absolutely, to do this with you. And I'm just reminded of our time together on the stage when we were writing and we were putting it on stage. Thank you so much for initiating it. And taking on from where you had mentioned about language learning, the purpose of this webinar is to create an understanding on the psychological process that is involved in language acquisition, and that is what Aarti was focusing on. And I will take it to the need and the methods to make language learning fun, because a child learns best when language learning can be fun and when it is not trusted upon the child. So there can be a question, should language learning be fun, or how can it be fun based? We need to understand that we need to have a paradigm shift from what we are teaching, from grammar teaching, which focuses only on the lower order of thinking, testing the child on knowledge and understanding of the grammatical patterns. And it does not really stimulate the creativity or the application or analysis part of the brain. So pathetically, our system is limited to lower order thinking, and that is why a student, when she finishes her 11th and 12th, and when she graduates to college, and primarily if she is from a regionally backward medium, or if the child has not had an enough exposure of the English language, she would have scored 95 or 98 in English, is still struggling to use the language with ease. So we need a paradigm shift. Where, when I mean paradigm, I talk about the pattern and the methodology that we've been following in teaching language. Just to make things more understandable, why do we need a paradigm shift? I'd like to quote from Tamil Nannul, the 8 kinds of students the Tamil Nannul talks about. The first kind refers to what is called as soil. Tamil mannun solluvanga. Children sometimes are like the soil who need constant attention. They need to be weeded, they need to be nurtured, they need to be manured, and they also need to be watered. So they learn through constant attention. And the second kind of students are students who are like a tea filter. Tea filter Tamil the neyyerin solluvaanga. So tea filter has the ability of let go of the essence. So sometimes we would be trying to teach a concept by telling a story. They'll remember the story and let go of the learning part of it. And the third kind of student set of learners could be like a pot with a hole. தமிழ்ல அதை வந்து இல்லி குடம் இல்லைன்னா ஓட்டை குடம்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. What happens is they don't have the ability to retain, and they are full only when they are filled in, and the motivation and the learning drains away once the facilitating space disappears. The fourth kind of students or learners could be like the goat. ஆடு நுனிப்புள்ளதான் மேயும்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. So shallow learning, surface learning, this is quite happen when things are getting tough. Last minuters, they just try to get two important points, and then they will be able to go and reproduce an essay, write an essay on that. So shallow learning and surface learning is one kind of student. And the next one are like the cow. So students of this kind can learn by ruminating. They learn by chewing the cud. They try to internalize, integrate, take time to understand what they have learned, and that's how they learn. And the next type are like the buffaloes. Buffaloes by themselves are clumsy. They may not have an essential purpose, so they are the distractors in the learning space. So they are distracted, and they would distract others. So having such a combination of students or learners in the classroom, having one kind of method may not primarily reach out to the need. And the seventh kind of students are like the parrot, who learn by repetition. So they learn best when they can listen and repeat. And the last set of students, they are like Annam, or the mythical swan, which is able to separate what is right for them. They're reflective, and they take in what they require, and they let go of what is not necessary. And when Aarti and I were having a discussion, she gave a very good reference. This Annapatchi is able to separate the wisdom from momentary learning. So having these kinds of students and learners, and having only one method to reach out for language acquisition, may not make learning concrete. So at this point of time, it is important that we create learning spaces and methodologies where the child can learn through the three domains: the head, the heart, and the hand. The head probably talks about the cognitive domain, where the child is able to understand language by processing information and using mental skills. And the heart is through the feeling level, so where the child is able to connect with the attitude and feeling of the language part of it. And the third one could be by doing it. The hand represents the child learns best by doing. The psychomotor skills, when they are activated, they learn it. So it is not in any linear sequence. So the child can learn through one or more domains. Having said that, just to complement what Aarti has been speaking about, the three stages of language learning, learning English or any language goes through three phases. First one is the fluency stage. The second one is the accuracy stage. And the third one is the appropriate use of language. Here, for purposes of convenience, I'd use the word appropriacy. Now, fluency. What does fluency mean? Fluency should not be misunderstood for the colloquial meaning that when somebody is fluent in English, they speak very good English. Fluency is probably the silent phase where the child picks up the primary words and will be able to speak, convey what the child thinks, may not be appropriately or grammatically right. For example, I'm just going to ask a child, did you eat? The child can say, yes, I eat. probably it has to say I ate, but it has taken hold of the primary word and has conveyed. So at this stage, when the child is learning, the child is able to pick up the primary words and may not be grammatically right. So they are prone to make mistakes. And the second stage is the accuracy stage, where the child with enough exposure and learning is able to answer, yes, I ate dosa, or I ate idli, where the grammatical accuracy is also taken care. And in the third stage, the appropriacy stage is called, it's primarily where the child is able to get in a lot of vocabulary. Using the right word in the right context is what happens at the appropriate stage. And all our language learning advances to the appropriacy stage, and we cannot claim that we are in that stage. It's only directed towards the stage. For example, if I have to introduce one of my friends, I want to tell you that my friend is someone who is very helpful, and always happy to help. And whenever you request for a help, she or he is going to be there, and the person will never take money for it. I have used 4 sentences. If I know the word volunteer, volunteer, then I will be able to tell that I have a friend who is a volunteer who can be of help. So brevity comes in when you have the appropriate use of language, and this comes with a lot of vocabulary building. Now, having said that, and trying to impress upon you that there is a need for a paradigm shift in our language learning, how do we go about it? Now, during this specific time when all of us have more time at home and we are more exposed to the things at home, the good news is, if the child at home is able to name or articulate in a sentence or two about everything that is at home, she or he has enough language to express. So this is a beautiful time to do that. And the first thing to do is to advance from known to unknown. In any learning, especially in language learning, taking the child from a known to an unknown context, it always helps the child to learn the language better. In the handouts that we have given, we have made a mention of domain-specific word list. Now, talking about domain refers to a particular thing and words related to that. So we've given you examples of domain word list, which comprises us of cutlery, the spices, home furnishing, hobbies, etc. So if we can facilitate a kind of a learning atmosphere where it is fun filled for the child, this is a beautiful time for the child to pick up language. Just to give you an understanding of what a domain specific word list could be. See, now this is a book, and a domain specific word list would be words related to reading and the books. Now, if you're going to have a label here, then it is called a book plate. Again, if you're going to take this part where the pages are bound together, this is called the spine of the book. And now, if you are going to take a book and then you want to know what this book is about, you have a write-up given on the back side. This is called the blurb of the book. And when you're going to open the page on the right, I think this is right for you. The page on the right is known as recto, and the page on the left is called verso. So a lot of words are there, and this page, which is exactly after the front cover, and before we have the book, you have an empty page. This is called the fly leaf. So you just take one thing and then you have a lot of words associated with this. So if a child can be introduced to domain specific word list, that would be a very beautiful way of increasing the child's love for language. Since we're talking about books and words, I was just thinking to mention a few words. We all have this habit of buying books, and we may not even find time to read them, and we may have a pile of books and stack it up for a while. So this habit of buying books and having it unread, you have a Japanese word called sundoko. TSUNDOKU. You don't have an English synonym to it. So when a child is introduced to this, it is really wonderful. And a book lover is called a bibliophile. And when we take a book, the first thing that we all would love to do is to just smell the book. And when you smell the book, the act of smelling a book is called bibliosmia. So this is what a domain specific word list can create an interest in the child. And the next thing is we need to we can create an environment called a happy corner at home, where you can engage the child to bring in things that are real. So we call it as play realia. So realia is using a real object in the language learning space or in the classroom. So when I say a happy corner at home, we need not decorate it with charts or picture words. It is a very safe place, and it could be over a cup of tea. It can be during your tea time. Okay, so you can just say we are going to play realia, and the child can be encouraged to bring in objects from the house. Suppose the child is going to pick up a plate. So what happens is, at the fluency level, now you can allow the child to experiment on what the plate means. At the fluency level, you can talk about the facts, or ask questions, or initiate a conversation where the child can talk about the usage, the utility value of the plate. The plate is circular, it is flat, it can be used for eating. That would be the first level of learning about something that it knows. Now, why play realia? Realia, it will always help the child to use the language that it has learned. Many a time we are instructed, learn 5 words, learn the meaning. Every day, if you take up 5 words, your vocabulary increases. The vocabulary can increase only when we use it. So realia helps in making the child use things which it is associated with the daily life. And taking it to the next level, if the child is fine with the fluency stage, you can take it to the next level, where you can connect the associative words. Now, if the for our example, it's the plate, and we have the plate here. So associative words could be the different kinds of plates that the child could be introduced. For example, the bigger plate or the larger plate is called a platter, and we can talk about the usage of it, and we do it in a very natural setting. You can say you can have your tea time in the happy corner, and you can have your a saucer there and say this is the smallest plate, so we use it along with the teacup. And you can also make some salad, and you can have a dessert. You have to take into time according to the availability of things that are available right now. So you can give variations of what is a difference between a salad plate, a dessert plate, a side plate. So in this way, you are expanding the idea of language to the things that the child is related to. And to take it on to the next level, where we move on to the appropriacy level, we can introduce the child to the lesser known things. For example, you're going to take the child to the kitchen. The child will be able to identify the spoon, the tumbler, the plate, the fork. Later, when you think the child is ready for that, you take it to the next level, where you can introduce a colander, the tongs, speak about the utility of it. So in that way, a receptacle, in that way, we are building the child's vocabulary and the love for language, because the child is able to relate with what the child is learning about. And when Aarti and I were having a discussion about taking it to the higher order of thinking, we had this discussion on taking it to the appropriacy level. We can have what is known as fancy a word, like a fancy dress competition, and the child can enact on, if I were a spoon. Okay, so if I were a spoon, and Aarti tells me this is possible for children above 10 years, because that's the time they will be able to really understand what is it to think creatively there. So you can also teach the child, like, if I were a spoon, the child can come up with various answers, like I would lend, share, whatever the child thinks about. So taking it to the next level. And then you can also create a patchwork of ideas and thoughts. say, I'm just limiting to one or two examples to get a clear understanding of how the process of making language a fun-based thing. Now you have a plate. So a patchwork of ideas would mean when the child thinks about a plate, what are the other things that comes to the mind? It can be a dish. The child can say it's breakfast, lunch, brunch, tea time, rice, cleaning, different cuisines, and you can slightly take it to talking about the different etiquettes and table manners, and we can always somehow talk about how it is important to save food. So a single plate, a single realia, and a small place where you can have a kind of interaction can make the child imaginative, can make the child learn things in the real way. And in all of this, we need to have a disclaimer. We are not going to look at the product of such learning. We are going to focus on the process. Let's not focus on the outcome. Is the child able to name all the things that is there in the kitchen? Don't you worry. If the child has related with two things, three things, and another 10 days, 4 or 5 things, I tell you, they have learned something for life. And this process of learning will be applicable for them whenever they learn something new. And creating this happy corner at home that I'm talking about is a space where there is a non-threatening atmosphere, where the child is not primarily instructed to do this, do that. It's not so. You allow the child to explore. You just like that allow the child to understand that whatever it is saying is right. And here I'd like to quote an idea called Baby Genius Dummy Parents. This is a idea promoted by Father Wilson from Anugraha Nochodapatti Dindakal. He says, whenever a parent is able to have a wow factor in what the child does and is not looking out for perfection in the child, that is the time when the genius of the child grows, because the child comes with unlimited potential. At this point of time, I would like to quote something from my life. When I was in my seventh standard, I was an invisible child. I didn't understand what was happening in class, although I was trying to make some sense. And always, in every child, you have this thirst to be seen and known. And there was a girl, a classmate of ours, Aarti also knows her. She was very active. She was probably a very talented child, and almost in every class, it was her name that was called out. And we are always motivated or inspired or sometimes even jealous that you need to be called out like that. But how of it we do not know. So one day our English teacher was talking about this child, and she said, see, Prasanna Minna has written a poem today. And this struck me. Till then I never knew that poems can be written by us. I was thinking like poems are prescribed and we need to by heart it. And for me, a poem is always limited to a rhyme. It has to rhyme scheme. When you break up the lines and when it rhymes, it means it's a poem. And Prasanna Meena was applauded in the class. And that day when I went home, there was a kind of a strong motivation where I thought, okay, let me also become a poet. Believe me, I never knew what it was. So somewhere children get that momentum. So when I went home, what happened was I announced my father. I told my father, Daddy, I'm going to become a writer. My father, I think, knowingly or unknowingly, he just played baby genius, dummy parents. He said, wow, you should. And that you should, he never asked me, how can you, what do you know the nuances of it, have you taken classes? Never did he question. I realized it lately. So immediately that thumbs up gave me that drive to, I went to the balcony, I started writing. And I still remember my first lines. I'm a girl of no use, like a bulb without a fuse. And then it goes on, right? And when I brought it back to my father declared that I was a poet. And that affirmation was something that helped me to write. And later when I went back to the poem, I could see there were a lot of errors. There were a lot of things that you can't call it a poem. But that approval really, really created a kind of an affirmation which made me believe. And that's what Aarti was also talking about, that we went on to write a lot of things and we experimented our creativity. So here it is very important that at home or in a classroom, it's important that we create a scenario for the child to explore, be it at any age, even with any text that you're dealing. Give space for the child to make sense of what it is first, rather than telling this is it. And next is we need to nurture it with positive affirmations. In the material that we have shared, we thought it was really it is useful that we need to affirm our children in our various ways, because we always we are quick to reprimand, quick to correct, quick to punish, but we take a lot of time to affirm. We take a lot of time to say, yes, it is fine. So, and it is important that we help them sustain their learning language skills by always giving them an opportunity to explore. So, on that note, over to you, Aarti.
How do I take over? Well, I'm in awe of what you said. Thank you so
Um,
much. It was so beautiful,
Thank you,
and I can
Aarti.
see that a lot of parents and teachers have really enjoyed what you're saying. And of course, we have a lot more activities. And I'm sure when we said we're going to do a language learning webinar, all of you would have expected us to do the LSRW, listening, speaking, reading, writing, which probably your B.Ed course and everything talks about. But before we go there, you need to really understand all of this developmental aspect of it. I'm going to mention 2, 3 points, and then we'll probably open it out to interaction. Jayanti, will that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
Will that be okay? Yeah.
That should be
So
fine.
this is where I need to also give you a couple of points. First, boys will definitely acquire language differently from girls. They are a little slower, and not because of intelligence or anything. It's just that girls do tend to acquire language much faster and a lot more than boys. And it's not like a rule, it's more something that we observe developmentally. Second is articulation in terms of speaking clearly. With children going to school younger and younger, I mean, I remember we went to school probably around 5 or so. Now, at sometimes at 1 year and 6 months, the child is in school, and it's very, very dangerous. But this is where we're expecting our children to speak clearly. And please understand, till 5 years, 5.5 years, girls do not acquire all sounds. Until 7.5 years, boys don't acquire all sounds, the phonemes. Because, it also involves the oromotor muscles, as we call them. They need to be ready to produce the sound. So do not force the child, do not keep correcting the child. And if you're a teacher, on your report card, please do not mention child cannot speak clearly, because till 7.5, they are not meant to speak clearly. Just because we are taking them earlier into school, it doesn't mean that the physiological aspects, the anatomical aspects, and the developmental aspects will speed up for our commercialization. And I'm sorry I put it really hard, but we'll need to understand that evolutionarily, we have certain skills and they will always be there. So this is where I'll probably end with a small anecdote, and then we'll take questions. And while doing that, I'll also talk about gadget usage. So when it comes to articulation, the last 3 sounds that boys acquire, r, d, and sh, are usually at 7.5. So I remember many years back, probably about 18, 19 years back, in my clinic, there was an English professor, and Jayanti, no offense to you, there was an English professor who brought his 2-year-old son, 2.5-year-old son. Some of you might know, because I've used this atrocious example in 1 or 2 of my workshops. So he came and he said, ma'am, my son, he spoke only in English. And he said, my son doesn't speak clearly. Please correct him. Please make him all right. Therapeutically intervene. And he gave me like a whole lecture. And when I checked the child, I noticed that there was only one sound that he was not able to actually articulate, and that was a r. And I said, just let him be, sir, because you have to wait till 7.5. Till then, model correct speech. So this is one cue for parents as well. When your child is not able to speak clearly, don't keep correcting them, saying "Sariya solle," say it again, those kind of things. Just continue to model correct speech. When you continue to model correct speech, the brain, remember I told you language can be acquired. So when children are modeling your correct speech, they will start correcting their own speech. As opposed to a parent who assumes that the child is speaking wrong, so you must also speak wrong. Please don't do that, because that's the worst way to deal with this issue. Coming back to what happened, this professor was very angry because I said, just let him alone and let him model speech. So he said, ma'am, I challenge you to a duel. And at the end of 1 week, my son will be able to say R. And I was very amused at the challenge that he set in front of me, but I just let him go. I knew developmentally it may not be possible. So he went, and at the end of 1 week, I had forgotten about this thing. But at the end of 1 week, he was waiting outside my clinic, and he said, "Ma'am, I have won the challenge you have lost." So I said, "Okay, sir, let's see what's happened." So he called this little child, and he said, "Kana, tell ma'am what I taught you." And in Tamil Nadu, I'm in Tamil Nadu, those of you who don't know, in Tamil Nadu, if we don't have a solution, sometimes we call superstar Rajnikant. So what happened was this little boy, this 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old, immediately started what the father had taught him for the whole week, which was Rajni, Rajni, Rajni. Some 50 times the child said Rajni, which means probably for the whole week, the child, because he needed to learn R, was saying Rajni so many times. So I was very amused, and I said, "Oh, not bad. This child has been able to pick up that sound that he was not able to articulate." And I bent down and I said, "I'm so thrilled that you've been able to say R. Tell me, what is your name?" And the child looked at me and he said, "My name is Aja." Because when you teach a sound that's not ready in the brain or for the body, you may be able to learn it in one situation, but you may not be able to generalize it to another situation. Generalization can happen only when there is overall readiness. And when it comes to language learning, which is also why I'm telling you, when we tell you that something takes 3 years or 5 years, you cannot just push the child before that and expect them to pick it up. And to add to what Jayanti had mentioned, many of these lists that we've given you, they are not to be used, in the mechanical chalk and talk kind of way. From tomorrow, English learning for 1 hour. Let's kill the child by teaching them this word list. Don't teach them spelling, because in real life, spelling tests are not going to happen. In real life, spelling is never tested. Nobody cares about your spelling in real life. It's only in school that we give so much weightage and waste endless hours of learning when the child could be acquiring other skills. Make it fun, and it's very, very important. We'll open the session to questions. Or Jayanti, do you have anything more to add?
Just one point to supplement the use of less gadgets, because when we were talking about the using of gadgets, what happens when we use gadgets is we always stunt the growth of imagination. So when you minus gadgets, we amplify imagination. For example, like if I'm just going to ask you to think about a mountain, if you can quickly tell me what kind of mountain can come into your mind. Okay, if you can just put it on the chat. There are different kinds of mountain. When I say mountain, there are different kinds of mountain that comes into your mind. It can be a brown mountain, an evergreen forest mountain, a snow-capped mountain. It can be a rocky mountain, a pebble mountain. So many things that can come. Okay, Himalayas also. Fine. But if I'm going to show a mountain on my gadget to my child cannot think beyond it. So this is just to support what Aarti was talking about. When you minus gadgets, you amplify imagination, and the power of imagination for the child is unlimited.
And I would add one more point, which I missed out right in the beginning. I always teach people something called the ocular lock. So when children are given a small screen and your tab or your phone, your eyes are called ocular, anything to do with the eyes. So the ocular motor muscles, so if you notice, the eyes have very small ciliary muscles that are holding the eyeball together. So the ocular lock happens, which means the eyeballs fix in one place because it's a very small screen, as opposed to an open area where I have to use 180 degrees, including peripheral vision. Now, when I have this ocular lock, what happens traditionally, and when you talk about it genetically and evolutionarily, when my eyes fix in one place, my ability to process sound or the auditory channel is stunted. So when children are looking at animated content, we are assuming that they're listening to the sound as well, but it actually stunts learning of language because a child is so focused on the visual skill, they've sort of cut off the auditory areas. And we've seen consistently for the last about 8 years, I've been documenting children having stunted learning of language because of the excessive use of gadgets. And so as a school, as a parent, if you've been using gadgets, please cut that out and build human connection. Because for language learning, like I mentioned right in the beginning, human connection is so very important. So we'll start taking questions now, Jayanti.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So how do adults learn language? It's slightly different from the developmental stages that I mentioned, but since Jayanti handles adults, she will probably tell you what they do.
The question is about how are adults learning a new language during college days. Especially it comes through a lot of exposure, and as I told you before, when you can create a space with a lot of interaction and with a lot of activities where the processing is very important. When you can process it to what the outcome has to be, that's the best way. With all my 15 years of experience, whenever you are going to read from the text, all of them doze off. What happens is, when you can have a pre-activity, a pre-reading, or if you can think about ways of bringing up a discussion in the middle, or then you can have a kind of a debate, or you can ask them to come up with some kind of response. That's when they can connect. And primarily, if they come from Tamil medium, what happens is they are able to think in Tamil, and but they are verbally stuck. They cannot express themselves in the English language. So that is some kind of stunted growth that has the mind has taken over a period of time. It can be due to fear, it can be due to peer pressure. Usually when you put them into groups, they're able to relate with people in the groups, and as a group, the scaffolding helps them to come out with answers. And again, when you create a non-threatening atmosphere, we have a set of code in our classroom. We agree that we will not laugh at anybody's mistake. So when a child is struggling, when a child is even making a big blatant mistake, the others are tuned in, or they agree to accept what is being told, and we just give them a kind of model correction, as Aarti mentioned. That's the best way. And in another session, if Aarti and I can come together, we can even talk about how integrating fine arts into language learning. That has also been a core area where I found people, when students, when you allow them to make use of music, theater, and writing, they are able to express themselves much better. That is what has positively activated people, students at the college level.
Thank you, Jayanti. Um, so there is a lot of questions about mother tongue influence and how does mother tongue acquiring the mother tongue help in acquiring another language. Please understand that, like I told you, language is an innate process. So if I've neurologically set the ability to use one language well, I'm able to think, I'm able to apply, I'm able to explore, I'm able to express myself in one language. I've already set the neural pathways. So when I acquire a new language, I need to acquire the phonemes, but the structure is already set neurologically, which is why if you look at some of the countries that have amazing research in science, there are people who are being taught in their mother tongue. Germany, for example, Japan is another example, where they teach only the mother tongue for the initial years. Till the child is able to pick up the mother tongue really well, they don't introduce a new language. And that's very important aspect neurologically. Unfortunately, in India, we don't agree to some of these scientific facts. We are still in the colonial hangover, if I can say that. Moving forward to the other question about children having difficulty with spelling, reading, writing. If you have pushed children to learn before they were developmentally ready, which means that there was a gadget addiction, there was not enough communication, there wasn't sufficient play, so the child did not really have time for this natural language acquisition, and you suddenly move to reading and writing. And I know that many preschools also end up teaching spelling, end up teaching the letters of the alphabet. Before learning words, if you teach the letters of the alphabet, this kind of problem is likely to happen. So now that you are having children at home, a good thing would be to start with what Jayanti was saying, using earlier, bringing in a lot of vocabulary, using a lot of conversation, using a lot of play in your conversation. Because the moment you start bringing in language at that level, it'll start bridging some of these gaps. It may not bridge everything, but it'll bridge some of these gaps. And I hope I've answered that. How to deal with hyperlexic children with speech delay. Please also check if the child is on the autism spectrum, because if it's on the autism spectrum, it's going to be a slightly different way of dealing with it. There are a lot of questions on the autism spectrum. So if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to take a few questions on autism specifically. Please understand that there are certain specific neurological differences in people, children and adults on the autism spectrum, but they have a brilliant mind inside, and they're more visual than auditory. And when we talk about language learning, I need you to understand that a large percentage of people with autism may remain nonverbal, but they may be able to communicate um, using other forms of communication. Earlier, we used to call it picture exchange system, but now we also use tabs and we use a few gadgets to assist them. We have a lot of assistive technology. There's another one called Avas that's come out. But for those of you asking me specifically how people with autism acquire language, it will be very functional and very, very slow. Don't expect instant responses, because then what will happen is you'll be forcing them or pushing them to parrot. And that is one of the most dangerous ways to push a person with autism. Please understand that if the child or the adult with autism is able to communicate without the use of language, and that communication is effective, please don't push them further. Because imagine that I don't know how to speak in, say, uh, Oriya or any language. Now, just because I don't know that, and I'm able to use a non-verbal way of expressing what I want, if you're going to refuse to give me something just because I'm not communicating the way you understand, I think I'm being very unfair. Language is used to be able to understand, meet needs. And if those needs can be met through another form and not verbal communication, please respect it. Because the person with autism is already struggling without, because of our lack of understanding, our lack of empathy. So please don't make it worse by telling them only if you say water, I'll give you water. Because then what's going to happen, they're going to stop saying the few things that they do say, because it's going to be so stressful. After a point, the anxiety gets so out of hand that I decide, let me not have this, let me settle for less. And that's the biggest danger that we do when children children have some special needs. So people have been asking me questions about children on the autism spectrum, adults on the autism spectrum. If you can specifically give me what you want, apart from this, I could probably take those questions.
Ate, there's a question that I'll take up. You spoke about a safe corner at home from Archana, I think. But shouldn't the whole home be a safe place? I was not talking about a safe corner. I was talking about a happy corner. Why did I mention that? Because that happy corner is a place which is free of instructions, where the child develops its own creativity, and whatever the child says is accepted in the right sense. So it's a happy corner because the child is able to explore it by itself when it can initiate the thinking process. So I think that has to be clarified. Of course, the whole house has to be safe. And there was also a question on where can we find the domain specific word list. Aarti wants to add something.
Jayanti, there are specific publications in India based out of Delhi. I think it's Alka Publications. They have a beautiful series of picture dictionaries for young children. 1,000 action words, 1,000 words of things in my house, 1,000 ways to say, to communicate. So there is an entire series, about 27 books, which talk about 1,000 words, which are very, very specific. I think also Collins has a very beautiful early dictionary, which is again a picture, partially and pictures and partially with words. That's also another resource that you can use for young children.
Thank you, Aarti.
DK as well. Yes, DK is no longer in being published, which is why I suggested Collins. But if you have access to DK, it's really good. Nothing is linear. No learning is linear. Learning is always something where you will construct, you will have to revisit. There will be a lot of cyclical aspects in learning, because what I already know, I will always come back and revisit. I would have learned something, I'll come back and revisit. So learning is never linear like the schools make us believe. Yes. How do you introduce reading habit to children? Read to the children and also be reading. Because reading is one thing that you have to be modeling. Because if you are not reading, but you're getting books for your child, no child is going to read. Switch off every gadget, work with reading. But I also suggest something called the bedtime debriefing. Just before your child goes to sleep every night, spend time with your child, read something small. Don't do major adventure stories and stuff, but you can do very simple stories for children. Read to them, have a small interaction at that point in time. Let children enjoy that interaction, because like I told you, language is acquired when there is secure bonding. So ensure that there is secure bonding. That's why I'm saying bedtime debriefing, because just before children are falling asleep, usually they have a million questions. And that's a good time to also introduce new words, new stories to them. That's a good way to introduce reading. Most of the schools, CBSE schools, teach Tamil and Hindi. Um, how do you teach if it's not the mother tongue? Unfortunately, it's a difficult thing, Rachel, but I would like you to understand that the process is the same. So there is a big uh, understanding here. Phonemes, not all languages have 150 phonemes. Each language uses a certain number of phonemes. So sometimes the root language may be the same. Like, for example, if you take Sanskrit as a root language, many Indian languages are built upon Sanskrit. So usually they're able to pick it up. But Tamil on its Tamil is a root language in itself. So the phonemes are very different there. And so the people who know Tamil and Malayalam will understand that the root language is the same, and they have influence. Malayalam also has a slight influence of Sanskrit. But when you take English and other Latin-driven root language phonemes, it'll be different. So my suggestion to you is to spend a lot more time in the Happy Corner, like Jayanti said, trying to introduce new words. But your question, will cartoons help? Definitely no. Please don't use a visual medium. On the other hand, you can use audiobooks. There are good audiobooks which you can use, where children can use a text and can be listening to it. There is also another software that I use, which is called Talkit. It's downloadable, it's free. So Talkit has a small screen. You can type out information, whatever you want. When you type it out, it speaks to the child. So you can use that. You can use text to speech. So when you use these, it helps children to acquire language.
Aarti, there is one question. When parents cannot communicate in English fluently, can the child pick up language easily? This is the situation commonly faced as parents want their child to speak fluently with good vocabulary. It can be a challenge, but that's where the classroom setup comes in. And if the child has a better exposure in the classroom and has a space to explore language, I think that can be addressed.
Some of you are giving out resources for everyone. Please follow them. How to make rural students to excel in English with a love. I have worked most of my life with rural kids. Please don't differentiate rural and urban. It's just exposure levels. So when you work with young children in the rural areas, I'm assuming that it's just that, the teacher is also not extremely fluent in the language that's being used. So what really happens there is that we start with vocabulary that can be represented in multisensory means, meaning that, you start within their environment. So I remember a fishing community that I worked with, all of my words were to do with shells, sand, nets, things that they could find in the ocean. With an agricultural community, I had worked completely with agriculture related, crop related words. So when you start from what the child is familiar with, from their own environment, it's very easy to introduce a new language, because language, the moment it starts becoming meaningful for a person, remember that they're already wired to be able to acquire. So the acquisition becomes much easier, but it takes a little longer, and you need to have a lot of reciprocal communication. So when you're working there, like Vygotsky says, you could have a lot of peer learning and a lot of social learning in this. It helps in language acquisition, especially when children do not have exposure to English because they're in semi-urban or rural areas.
There's been a suggestion by Thangam Philip. She's mentioned Word Menu by Stephen Glazier is a book which has the domain-specific word. Thank you, Thangam Philip, for that. And there's a question how to inculcate a love for the language. It also comes by modeling. If the teacher is very passionate about it and can find ways of making the child participate in the learning activity, it is modeled rather than the rote learning method where you have just the question and answers.
How do I make learning fun for my 3-year-old? Don't teach. Allow your child to play. 3-year-olds do not need to be taught. They need to be allowed to play and explore and enjoy life. Please don't kill it, okay? Because children don't really need explicit teaching. They need a safe environment and a stimulating environment, not teaching. Does language learning get associated with surroundings? Yes. Surroundings do, because language is naturally acquired, it's never taught. Naturally, the surroundings will affect the child. Phonetics, Jayanti will have a different take on it, but if you ask me, teaching synthetic phonetics, especially the English kinds that I'm seeing in India right now, is probably the fastest way to destroy the joy of learning. I'm personally against phonetic teaching. Children acquire phonemes and morphemes, and also spelling uh, as they understand and the language becomes meaningful. Trying to break it down into specific phonemes, etc., is actually delaying spelling acquisition in many children. Vocabulary, see, then what I can do is I can just, rattle out words and the child will be able to use it. When I say model speech, you need to be able to speak in sentences, simple sentences, so that the child understands this is how it's used. Because when you expose the child to a lot of listening, very spontaneous listening, it becomes much, much easier. How to handle the use and exposure of bad words? See, that's where how do you develop um, appropriate speech? You need to be the one that the child comes to. You need to be the go-to person. If I love you so much, I will want to model you. Young children look up to us. They model us in every way. I remember when I used to run the school, I don't wear any jewelry, as you would know, just this much. So once I remember this mother came to me and she said, we are goldsmiths, and my daughter has been refusing to wear jewelry because she loves you so much, and she says, I want to be like ma'am. And I'm just giving you a simple example of how much children observe. I had, till then, even it didn't occur to me that I don't wear jewelry. It never occurred to me because I was so unconscious to that fact. But when I noticed that the children were watching me and learning these things, I realized that the potential that we have to inspire them. So if I could ask you, how do you really help them overcome the use of bad language? If your language is impeccable and you're using something that comes from the heart, believe me, children will model you if they feel completely loved and safe in your arms. Yes, Rachel, most people teach Tamil and Hindi in the rote way. Most people teach everything in the rote way, so I really don't know what to do. That's why we're having these webinars, hoping to change at least some few people who will be able to love children over a period of time. Um, Anju, we hope to have a lot more webinars in the coming years, because coming months, I hope the lockdown is a couple of months, not years. So we will be posting it on Facebook, and we will be emailing it to people. Should the Dolch list of sight words be taught in LKG and UKG students? Seema, again, since I know that you work in a school where you have a lot of first generation learners, Dolch does help. Dolch words are the 220 most commonly used English words, but you need to expose it in a very, very sensitive manner. It's not enough to just introduce it as spelling or as dictation words, as we call them. There is a very specific way in which it has to be exposed. And maybe in our next webinar, we will try and use the Dolch list and the keywords, the Fry list. It would be useful. Is there any analogy, understanding? I'm not taking mathematical concepts right now, Aruna, because there is a lot that's in common, but that's an entire, opening out the Pandora's box, as I would say. So we're not taking that right now. Please do not let twins to sit together at any time. Twins, I'm a twin myself. I have a brother who's my twin. He's 18 minutes younger than I am. We just happen to be born together. Otherwise, we are completely poles apart. So please don't dress us alike. Don't speak to us like it's always my sister and then the twins. Like we are treated as one entity. We are not. We are two different people. So if you have twins in your house, I would ask you to treat them as individuals. Don't use gadgets to be able to occupy them. There will definitely be one of those in the twins who's always moving around, and one that's quite sedentary. Work with the sedentary one first, and then work with the other one. Usually you will have it under control. And it's not going to be easy, let me warn you. I'm not able to tell you if your child will reach on par with other children when there is a delay or a deviation, but exposure always helps. So more than just therapeutic interventions, please ensure there is a lot of play, a lot of socialization, and also a lot of communication with you. Don't make your communication, what is this, what is that, tell me this, tell me that. Don't do it as naming. Like Jayanti had mentioned, make it meaningful, make it real, make it interactive. Otherwise, it doesn't work. children exposed to multiple languages, children usually cope. Please don't worry about it. As long as there are no other developmental delays or neurological issues, most children manage with multiple languages, especially when they have a good supportive schooling system. In India, because we don't have very supportive schooling systems, many schools actually do not know how to work with the younger age groups. We have a lot of difficulty. So I would put it back on put the onus back on the school systems and the boards of education, which actually rob children of the joy of learning. I know that I make these statements and people hate me for it. I'd rather be hated for saying the truth than go along with something that's not scientifically right and definitely not good for children. What if the child is restless in learning a language at the initial level and later hates the language itself for not understanding? And it is part of academics. Ma'am, let me please help you understand that when the learner is motivated, learning happens naturally. So if the child is restless, I would ask you to look at what ways can I, or what means can I employ, what means I can use to make it interesting. Now, not everybody is a motivated learner. Not everybody is going to jump in quickly and say, okay, I want to learn this. So try and see what works for your child. Each learner is different, like Jayanti beautifully mentioned. There will be 8 types of learners, and you'll need to see why the child is not motivated. Is it really boring and dry? Are they doing the grammatical teaching that she said we need to move away from? Because when something is meaningful, especially language, children really love it. So please understand that just because they are restless, we can't force them to do more. Instead of that, you'll need to see how I can make them more engaged learners, and maybe we can take that as feedback for another session on how we can motivate learners. What kind of activities I can use at different age groups. Please share the different types of students. Jayanti, that question is for you.
Well, the
And the
reference
other
is
one
from.
also about correcting mistakes of college students. Maybe you can take that as well.
Yeah, sure. The reference is from Tamil Nannul, which talks about 8 types of students. The first one, as I told earlier, refers to the kind of students who can be compared to the soil, Tamil man. It is like they need constant attention. The second one is the tea filter, the students who cannot take in the concrete learning, who let go of the essence. The third kind of students are like the pot with a hole, who are unable to retain, and they are full only when the learning is happening and the motivation is not really contained and taken further. And the fourth kind of students are like the goat, where there is a lot of shallow learning. And the fifth kind of students are like the cow, who learn and integrate by chewing the cud and by ruminating. And the next set of students are compared to the buffaloes, where they are distracted, they are clumsy by themselves, and they become a distraction for others. And the other set of students or learners can be the parrot, where they learn by repetition. And the last one is the Annapachi, the mythical swan, who have the ability to separate wisdom from the momentary, what they require and what they have to let go. That was the reference that was given. I missed out the other question. It's just quickly running.
Did you correct college students when they make mistakes? That was
we do it in a way where we model corrections, we audit corrections. That is always very effective, rather than telling no, what you are saying is wrong. At the end of the session or the class, every class, it's good to set aside some, say, 7 or 8 minutes, where when the teacher can just write it on the board or just tell it aloud, like if there's been a grammatical structure error or a spelling mistake or even a pronunciation, we can reaffirm this is the way it has to be done, rather than pointing out to the person. In that way, the adults take it more respectfully, and when it is for them, the anonymity also helps in learning. And this is a very conscious practice which we need to develop. And if we do it in this way, it really helps. So this is also one of the paradigm shifts that has to be done in our classroom management.
Thank you. Anju, your question about a genius child and dummy parent for an autistic child. When people are on the autism spectrum, and Jayanti, I'll take that question because it's on the autism spectrum.
Sure.
Please also understand that when you are working with children on the autism spectrum, structure is most important. So once you have your task very well structured, what can be done is to structure the task with error freeness, meaning that don't have that element of where the child can fail. As opposed to when the child has already attained mastery, then you push up the skills so that the child may be able to make a mistake and correct themselves from it. Instead of, in that case, the parent doesn't dumb down, the task is made error free so that the visual structure offered by the task helps the child. I hope I have answered your question. One question from Shobha, that's for you.
Well, people who love language always have very precise rules that it has to be spoken only in the right way. We'll have to always remember it is our second language and it's okay. And apart from being an English teacher, if you really love the language, we speak it in the way that we want. And maybe people do not take up corrections when they are not open to it. So when it is not needed, it's best to avoid. When there is a need, it's good that we do it. And even Aarti was speaking about phonetics. Yeah, synthetic phonetics doesn't really help. We really try to fake up pronunciation. It is always good that we go by what is natural to us. Learning is best when it is in the natural way, when it is like only the received pronunciation. We need not really go in for the Australian style or the American or the British way. It can, unless and until it is understood, I think it's the right way. So correction, that's part of the fun learning of language. When we know, we are not very specific about how we speak Tamil. Tamil அப்படின்னு நம்ம பேசையில அதுல வந்து we don't go into the nuances of it. So language is for understanding, and if that purpose is achieved, then I think it's fine. Unless if it is for an academic purpose, when you need to really pronounce it rightly, that is a time that you need to take. Otherwise, it's just for understanding. That's my take on that question.
The duration for gadgets that can be used, may I make it very clear? 0 will be like a good number, but I know that many of you need to, give a gadget to a child so that you can carry on with your work, or you're working from home and you need to engage as little as possible. I'm not going to give you a number, but about 40 minutes ages the brain by 3 years. 40 minutes of gadget usage ages the brain by 3 years. So I would definitely reduce it as much as possible. And as a family, you need to arrive at the number that would be best. I hope I've answered your question. How can we explain words that are not practically seen? Say, for example, honesty. Model it. When you model something, children understand it. I don't need to know honesty. I need to feel it. I need to be it. There is a difference between being and explaining. If you are that, children understand it. I hope I've answered that. Informative. While introducing new things to 3.5-year-olds, should I say them in English or mother tongue? Say it in any language, as long as you feel connected. If the child has a disability, if the child has a sensory loss like a hearing loss, stick to the mother tongue. If the child has specific delays in language, stick to one language. And you can decide. Speech therapists usually suggest mother tongue, but I suggest any one language which the child will have maximal exposure to. So that would be the rule. How to handle a student who fails to open his mouth in the classroom? Support them, ma'am. Please understand that it's never easy to speak up. Jayanti will know that before I went on stage, I was a terrified, extremely scared child. And I've had severe breakdowns just thinking about going on stage. And now I do that for a living. But it took a lot of courage to be able to go on stage. And so if a child is not speaking in the classroom, there is an inherent need expressed. When somebody is not doing something or somebody is doing something, they're expressing a need. So please understand, if you're a teacher, sit with the child, let them just speak to you initially. Let them just communicate with you. And then maybe with a small group of students, slowly build it up. You don't have to always achieve 100% expression straight away. Sometimes it may take up to a year. And like I mentioned, it could be part of the silent phase. The child is not yet confident. And so they may be in the pre-production phase. At that point, they may not be able to speak. So please use both rules there.
Sorry. Aarti, I'll just add to what you said because this might be helpful for many. We always have students in the first year when the very first question that we ask them, what is your name? That could be the most terrifying question for them. And I've had examples of students who have trembled and shivered on that very question. But creating a supportive system and creating a classroom environment where the child is free to make mistakes or even to be silent has always helped the child to go and explore the language in a long run. I do not know whether the person that I'm speaking is online with us. I remember when this child was in my first year class, the very question that I asked her was, "What is your name?" The child started to shudder and shiver and started to cry. What I possibly did was I just went and stood next to her and said, if you want, you can say. Otherwise, there's no need, right? And the class ended like that. And it took days together for the child to answer me the question. But always we need to give the child an assuring smile and a nod and accept the child that she's part of the classroom. And then when in her final semester, she was part of a script writing because she took lessons, extra effort to go to the library and take the small helps that were available. And finally, she did a seminar which I remember till date. It was done in 2008, and I still remember the way she had come out. It took nearly 6 semesters. We need to give the child the support and the space and the silence for the child to, the egg has to break from within. It needs at least 21 days for the egg to break out. If we are going to just prod it with a lot of our attention and unwanted comments, it may not even open at all. Just wanted to support what you were saying.
That's a beautiful example. Stealing in your classroom, children laughing in the classroom. Let me mention, if stealing is happening and you're giving moral stories, nothing will change. Children steal for many reasons. One, when they don't have what the other child has, they could come from backgrounds where they're not able to afford it. Sometimes children steal because they have a lot and they want more. And so there is no one quick solution, but please stop using moral stories. Moral stories don't help anybody. Instead, what you really need to work on is teaching children to keep their things safe, because what needs to happen here is also building responsibility and problem solving skills. Because when we're always trying to correct something, we're missing out on what we could be developing. If you focus on what can be developed, what needs to be corrected usually goes down. I hope I've answered that question. A child who's laughing in the classroom, we usually call it clowning. Children who have difficulties in learning or struggle with learning sometimes may be clowning in the classroom. Please don't reprimand them. But many times what could happen is, if you are not prepared as a teacher, children will use clowning to irritate you. So please see if it's you or the child that needs support. If the child needs support, work on a one-on-one remediation that could help. How do I tell a child that a word picked up from a cartoon is being unpleasant? Telling children that a word is pleasant or unpleasant usually may increase the usage of the unpleasant word, because when I tell you don't do something, the subconscious mind will pick up what it should not do. So more than that, what I would do is to increase your communication on what is appropriate and what is pleasant, as you would say, because when children have a lot more exposure to what is pleasant, usually what is inappropriate goes down. And of course, reduce exposure to what is inappropriate. Law students take language classes just for granted. Language, unfortunately, it's given very poor weightage even in our 12th standard exams. But when we, as passionate teachers, change our attitude towards it, I'm sure more children will enjoy it. My nephew, for example, loves languages. He started writing very early. I think he's also seen me writing very early. I'm glad he's doing that. So it can start from our attitude towards science and language. How much weightage do I give to language? How much weightage do I give to the sciences? So it takes a time. That's why Jayanti also mentioned a paradigm shift. Is it good reading storybooks for a 1-year-old child? For a 1-year-old child, hug your baby. Let your child feel happy. Have a lot of happy conversation. It can be even meaningless, but have happy conversation. Then you can bring the reading a little later. For a 1-year-old child, you're reading stories, they're going to get irritated with you. But on the other hand, have a lot of loving conversation. I think that's important. what would be the appropriate age to introduce writing after 7.5. So participants, I hope it was useful. If you found it useful, give me a shout out. Let me know in the feedback that you enjoyed yourself or what you would like to learn in future. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope it was useful from the feedback. I understand many of you were able to resonate with what we said and that you learned quite a bit. Thank you, Jayanti. For me, this has been one of the most enriching experiences, just being able to do this with you. Of course, I've known you as a childhood friend, but today, as an esteemed colleague, as somebody who so beautifully explained so many things, thank you so much. Divya and the entire team at Vedanta, thank you. This means a lot to so many of us. Jayanti, from your side, any closing remarks?
Aarti, thank you so much. I think this is the most beautiful time that I will be remembering. Thank you for initiating the whole thing, for allowing me to share the platform with you. And I'm sure we've complemented each other, and it's been truly a long journey together. It's been very soul enriching. And you really bring in a lot of difference into many people's life. I'm so happy that we could do this together. Divya, thank you so much, Divya. You've been a great support, encouraging us, and being a part of our earlier discussions. Really loved it. And thank you, entire Vedanta team, and also Merlin and Restina, who helped me to compile the material. They've been always behind all the efforts that we've been putting together. Ati, this has been so meaningful and so truly enriching. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we'll meet you soon with another webinar. Thank you so much.